Dagens forskare. Hon växte upp i det sovjetiska Estland. Hon älskar att baka. Hon älskar att baka. Hon har tittat på alla säsonger av Hela Sverige bakar. Hela Norge bakar. Hela England bakar. The Great British Bake Off. Pille började tidigt sin forskarbana och hon har på olika sätt beforskat sociala medier. Idag är hon, om inte den yngsta, så åtminstone en av de absolut yngsta professorerna här på universitetet. Pille har valt att hålla den här föreläsningen på engelska så att ni ska få ut så mycket som möjligt av henne. Hon är professor i medie- och kommunikationsvetenskap. And now I switch over to English, as you can hear. Please give her a warm hand. Welcome on the stage, Pille Pruulmann-Vengerfeldt.
Hi. My name is Pille. I work here at Malmö University. I'm a professor within media and communication science.
And if this would be any other environment, that would be quite a normal way to communicate. Unfortunately, I'm not really that good at sign language. I do practice. And this is going to be my journey and my talk, because it's titled In the Mind of the Professor, it's going to be very personal. So that's why also this very personal start in with my little attempt to sign language, but also as this is my way to push the boundaries of what's considered to be normal. What is considered to be inclusive, what is considered to be important. So this talk is about digital parenting, and it is going to be about my parenting experiences and how I turn them into a research project. So this experience is, as I said, very, very personal. But first, let me start about how I got here. So this is my family. This is us about 4 years ago, a bit more than 4 years ago. And it's taken in our home in Estonia, this picture, where we were posing as a family picture after a long and not so really nice start in my youngest son's life. So my research projects, as Joachim nicely introduced me, have been about social media, about internet use, about why do some people use the internet? Why should they? Because in early 2000s there was a lot of public discussion about if you don't use the internet, you're not really a good person. You're kind of backward and not really the best kind of citizen because you can't be participatory in the society without using the internet. And I was going like, what? Are you really sure about that? Because I see many people using the internet in very different ways. Some people use it for cat videos. Other people use it for advancing democracy. And is it really equal benefits that people get just because they are coupled to a device that exchange data? So I did my PhD. I had my oldest, the kid, you can probably tell which is the oldest kid on the picture as well. And while I was still doing my PhD, he was a lovely baby. He slept and ate and behaved really nicely. He's still a lovely young man now as well, but sort of grown out of some of the baby loveliness. Then I started my career in the university. At the second baby. And that was the same. He just slept a bit differently, but I thought, okay, now I know all about children. I know about babies. I can do this. So when I was my husband was saying, yeah, maybe we should have the third one as well. Yeah, okay, we can do this. I'm gonna have this baby. I'm gonna take this baby. We're gonna go to a conference. He's gonna eat and sleep, and we're gonna participate in international research community as I've always done. I was organizing this conference in UK while living in Estonia, and I was just like, oh, I had everything under control. And then I have even a paper from a doctor saying that my pregnancy has been totally normal. And then, of course, suddenly it wasn't normal anymore, because I was giving birth when there was about 6 weeks to the deadline. And the baby was born, and it was whisked away from me to the intensive care, where many doctors were trying to make sure that he would live. We went through many operations, long hospital stays, and then with that we got a diagnosis as well. And that diagnosis said that the multitude of things that's wrong with my baby is called charge syndrome. Let's say in medical language, a syndrome means that when several things happen together. It's in charge, it's loss of hearing, loss of vision, problems with heart, problems with lungs, problems with eating, problems with balance. And it happens in a different degree in different children. But my kid has, pretty much everything. So he has not the complete set, but quite a lot of that. And then, what do? I'm a researcher, so I start reading. I start reading everything that there is on the internet about this. How do you cope with having a different child? What's there to expect? What's there to do? Can it be fixed? And I found this really, really wonderful place on Facebook, which is a charge syndrome parents network. And that literally became my lifeline. That was me really being saved. Because what was normal, that kid, that wasn't a normal kid. That was not supposed to be happening. But then there was this group of people for whom this was their everyday. This was their normal. And this sort of became in the early days, my lifeline, my saving grace, saving time. But in the later days also, there's kind of a bit of analytical gaze. Okay, but how did I do it? But before I tell you how a sort of social media group can actually save parents like me, let me just really, really briefly tell you what's normal. So there is actually a scientific definition about normality from psychologists. So you would say that, okay, this is the population. This is them over many different kind of spectra, and they figured out that overall, across intelligence, across abilities, people fall under this kind of what is called a bell curve or normality curve. And then they also make out a definition that normal is if you're 2 standard deviations one way or the other from the average. Average age, then it becomes normal age, and then you have the average intelligence, and then you have the normal intelligence, and all that is sort of in that limits. But then my kid is there. It's 1 in 12,000. And what is normal for that situation doesn't really fit on that curve. It doesn't really fit on that nice graph. So you have to figure out, and you have to make space for normal. So when I told this community that I'm going to have this talk about children with charged community, this is the community website, the community Facebook page, and I posted this request. Dear parents, I want to showcase your children in my talk. And I got over 100 responses, over 100 pictures. So you're going to get some of those pictures in this talk with the full consent of their parents, so that I want to also showcase how people use pictures in Facebook to generate, to broaden out the limits of normality. But first, a very personal picture. This is Rivo on the right side. This is my son, who is now 5. And on the left side is Oscar. And Oscar comes from Great Britain. He's about 2 months older than Rivo. And that was my first wow moment. Like, oh my God, they look so like. They're like twins. So this is me finding a twin to my son across many seas. And that made me so happy. It's a cool little kid who has such an energy, and he's also, in this picture, he's a poster child to a Donna Louise charity. Raising money for people with different abilities. So he's a 1 in a million campaign poster child, inviting people to step it up and collect some money. But as you can see, they have this similar smile and similar energy and similar spirit, even if their medical conditions are similar yet a little bit different as well. So that was my first recognition of belonging. These are people like my child. This is a large community. I recognize him there in those faces. And you can keep that little face in your mind, and you can see how many of those similar patterns that you recognize. Because charge also comes, at least sometimes, with typical facial features. Not all of them are exactly alike, but you can also say, okay, they do have something in them that's similar. So what does a Facebook community do to generate normal, or to push the boundaries of normal? So first of all, it allows people to share pictures and share stories of their children by saying, we are like everyone else. There are people who like going to museums. There are people who like baking. There's people who like writing or handcrafts or popular culture, cars, movies, or something else. And they are also they like to be silly a little bit and play games. So they are children like anyone else. And that's really important, because oftentimes when people see disability or different ability, they get so put off from that the normal child, or the child that's happy and glad and enjoying life, gets lost in that disability. And oftentimes in this Facebook group, holidays are one of the ways to celebrate this normal. So this is a selection of pictures from different Christmas celebrations. Because again, if you're a parent in Facebook, you share pictures of your Christmas celebrations. You've seen them, probably everyone has seen them. But in this case, this celebration is happening with people who maybe look a little bit different, or who have different challenges in their life. But then also, this Facebook group is very much also an American thing. So this is also something that for me has pushed the boundaries of what's normal towards much more American culture about normality. And what could be more American than Halloween? So that is pictures of those children dressed up as different Halloween characters. And Halloween in America also means adaptation, because there is enough people with different abilities that they get the adaptation to the streets. Namely, children with charge often can't eat through the mouth. They are tube-fed. And one adaptation that is made is that they post purple pumpkins near the houses where people get stuff that's not necessarily candy. So that kind of adaptation, that kind of agreement on Facebook that we're gonna spread the awareness of children, not everyone can eat, whether it's allergies or whether it's abilities or whether it's special medical needs. But they shouldn't be left out of the Halloween experience. So there is this adaptation that allows people to share this awareness through posting purple pumpkins. So you ever see a purple pumpkin, you know that this is part of this awareness raising. But then, of course, costumes and being silly, and that's always also part of Halloween, and that's very much part of the parenting experience when you're an American family. So that's also my insight, not only to different abilities, normality, but also to American normality in a very, very lovely way. But sometimes these different normalities also need just a little bit of adaptations. So this is a selection of pictures from Easter that parents shared. And all the captations with the pictures are their accompanying texts. And you can see that a typical Easter hunt has also required extra adaptations by community to make space for those kind of different children. So charge comes together with what is medically termed as deaf blindness. And it doesn't really mean that you are both completely deaf and completely blind, but it often means a combination of no, that's my Swedish coming in. Reduced vision and reduced hearing. This is a topic I've discussed heavily with the Swedish doctors as well. But so what kind of adaptations can one make for children so that they could, again, feel normal? You could make them hunt eggs that are not edible because, again, not so much chocolate perhaps is needed. You can make eggs that beep so that people with lower vision can find them. Although that doesn't really help with people with low hearing. But then you can make the eggs really brightly colored so that people with sort of limited attention or limited vision can more easily find them. And again, be part of what is considered normal. In our family, there has never been that much of Easter egg hunt. That's not what we do in Estonia. But that is another way to adapt the surrounding and to also let other people know. Because I'm guessing that after sharing those pictures, there might be more communities doing beeping, brightly colored eggs to help those people with different abilities. And then, of course, there are babies who don't necessarily make it to the going and hunting. The ones who are really tiny, whose medical challenges are really, really big. But then the belonging to that community is through staged pictures, like Savannah's pictures here. And then, of course, when you're a parent, you want to share your pride in your children. So they're going to talent shows, and then they start kindergartens, and then they graduate school, and they play baseball, and they dance, and it's all super cool. And you'll see those pictures in whatever community. This is what parents do. But then when you, in a different abilities children community, those pictures might take ever so slightly different turn. So you are sharing a picture of your 9-year-old eating macaroni. Might not be a typical 9-year-old super proud moment, but for a charge community, a child who eats by themselves a whole bowl of macaroni is super good. Or steps. First steps, of course, are very important. But if those first steps come at age 4 or 5 or 3, or with the help of a walker, it's still a moment of pride. And that parental pride shared in this community comes without pity. If I'm telling you that my 4-year-old started walking by himself, you might feel a bit sorry that for the first 4 years or first sort of 3 years, he didn't walk. But if I post that in the charge community, they go, yay, without any reservations, without any holding back, because they get it. And that's what you need to create normal. You need enough people to really get it. And then for charge group, the normal is also created through celebrations. And of course, birthday pictures are very important in any kind of parenting moment. Filled the year, yay. But in charge community, this is also hooked together with the concept of survival. Survive the first year. That's the toughest, because I think about 10, 15 years ago, the mortality rate around first year of charge children was 30%. So 30% didn't really make it to the first year. So that's super important. They made the first year. Next important milestone, they made it to the year 5, because after that it gets significantly easier. So, and then when you've made to 18, that's like massive. So that becomes a moment of shared pride. And of course, there are the moments of shared sorrow. Nobody shared with me pictures of mourning or pictures of lost children, but that's also in that community. And that makes the birthday pictures that extra little more special. And that sort of generates, hundreds of likes and hundreds of hearts for the children who have filled their, who have survived the next year. And charge community allows you to be normal also in different ways. So I don't know how well you see these pictures, but there are people with mechanical help to breathe. There are people with tubes for getting nutrition. And little Kai on the bed in the middle, he's having what's called a charge party, meaning that he wakes up at night and just is happy, cheerful child for about 2, 3, 4, or 5 hours in the middle of the night. And again, people get it. People in this community can sort of recommend solutions, but also can just give you wholehearted sympathy of that's your normal. That's your normal, that your child decides to have a party in the middle of the night. And you just have no choice but to cheer on. But then this is also a group that gives you hope. It gives you the moments of future that you're really, really hoping that your child will get to. Because this for me was sort of when you have the baby, you're in the hospital, you're not really sure that it's going to make it through the night. And then you see those pictures of 5-year-olds walking up the stairs, or 20-year-olds getting their university diplomas, or 30-year-olds having families. And I said, oh my God, if they can make it, mine can make it as well. So this is something to look forward to and share the joy and expectations that it's going to be possible. But I didn't want to sort of have it as such a sort of bit of sorrow note, because again, I want to talk about Facebook. So Facebook also has a very, very specific way of dealing with pictures. Namely, the post that you put in the community, if it doesn't have a picture, it doesn't really get shown on so many people's personal pages. So people have learned to trick the algorithms, meaning that they add a picture to the post which is called picture for attention. And that picture for attention is a way to uplift the actual text post. And sometimes people post, I have this question, and they describe, or have this challenge I describe, and then they post a picture which is not really related to the question, but picture for attention. And of course those posts get more attention. But this is also a way to share super, super pretty pictures. And this is also another way to create normal, because you can see that many of these pictures are also taken by professional photographers in the new normal of digital self-archiving that takes place in many communities. But also school pictures. For me, this is another very American tradition to have systematic yearly school pictures. But that's another, it's a mark of progress. It's a mark of making it through another year. And that's something that this community, this sharing moment, has become super crucial for. As I said in the beginning, I asked my community to share pictures. And this is only about the half of the pictures you've seen. So I'm going to leave you with a slide thanking my charge family, but also showing all the other kids who didn't make it to the slides, because we only have half an hour and there's only that many pictures that you can put on a screen at one given time. So this was my talk, and thank you for listening.
Tack så mycket, Pille. Medan Pille sätter sig så ska vi också få upp en doktorand och en masterstudent, Johan Farkas och Hanna Meyer Suhörste. Och medan de sätter sig till rätta så vill jag påminna om att kaféet är fortfarande öppet om man vill fylla på någonting. Och det kommer vara så även en stund efter att vi har avslutat detta samtalet. Vi vill även passa på att ge en varm applåd till Annika och Evelina som gör ett fantastiskt jobb som teckentolkar. De tecknar alltså från engelska till svenska och sen till teckenspråk. Jag tycker det är värt en applåd faktiskt. Och med det lämnar jag över ordet till I give you to Hannah and Johan.
Thank you for the really nice talk, Pille. It was great. What is interesting to me is how is it for you to combine your personal life with your research and really opening up personal stories to the public?
Underneath this talk is also an article that I wrote for a book project. And this is the toughest article I've ever written. because I felt suddenly that there were so many stories inside me that sort of were searching for this analytical lens to how can they come out? How can I make sense of them? At the same time, being a researcher was something that actually was part of my sort of saving grace. Because when we got first the diagnosis and the baby was in the intensive care and it was really difficult, that was my first worry. What about my research? What about my book projects? What about my students? What about my papers that I'm going to write? What about the conference that I was supposed to organize? Because I couldn't really imagine my life without being a researcher. And then this sort of analytical me kicked in, and I was like, okay, but why do you have to give it up? You don't really. I can sort of, when I talk to my colleagues about it, we were talking, yes, there is some kind of research project in there. I just have a little bit also to it, had to settle. So Rivo he celebrated his 5th birthday in February, so it's settled for about 5 years now. So there is enough distance within me to be able to tell this story to other people. And also to put a theoretical, analytical lens on it, to be able to also give an insight. Because it's also, I was looking at those pictures, putting the slideshow together, and I was thinking, if you're not charged mom, you don't really get some of those meanings on those pictures, because you don't get that the 5th birthday celebration cake is a celebration of survival, because you don't really have to, you have never had to do this. So I'm thinking that this kind of research is also super, super important for many kind of reasons.
And how do you set limits? What do you keep to yourself?
That's such a hard question. Because I don't know yet. I have a promise that I'm going to write 200 words about openness by tomorrow. Because someone saw my advert to my talk and was thinking, maybe you want to share about openness on Facebook. And I was thinking, okay, I can definitely do this, but that's sort of deadline tomorrow. But I'm thinking still that I filter out maybe the very mundane, because a lot of it was just going through the motions. And I also luckily have forgotten a lot about it, because that's the body's way to protect you. I don't really know how we got through the first year. I have some spark moments. I have them highlighted, colored moments. I have my diary, which I haven't really read. But my oldest went through the 1st grade, and in Estonia, 1st grade is kind of super important. And I don't really know how it went. So that's the sort of, I can't share everything, because some of it I just don't remember.
Yeah, thank you so much for this very interesting talk. You mentioned in the talk that our society is becoming increasingly digital, and this is not a process we can see ending anytime soon. And I think your talk really shows how, in this case, social media can serve as a space of community, and but at the same time, for people with disabilities, living in digital society can be quite difficult. So I know this is perhaps also a difficult question, but how do you see the digital? How could we make the digital society more inclusive?
I think the sort of the first step is being aware that there are people with different abilities, that there are people who have different challenges, and of course there are technological advances that are being constantly made. The other day we had a conference about digital archiving, and as a privacy intrusion horrible image was a technological advancement of a jawbone technology, where it would read your mind to make it understandable for the computer. I was going like, two, very conflicted. Oh my God, that could help people who can't speak get their ideas out. Oh my God, do I really want to have a technology that can read my mind? And that's the constant struggle. There are stuff that can be super beneficial for many people, which can also have the flip side of the dark side of the not really helping the society or intruding the privacy or so on. But I'm guessing that to a certain extent we just have to go on. We just have to keep on making those technologies happen with this sort of awareness, but not letting the awareness stop us. Because if we let the awareness stop us and say, no way, we can't have a technology that makes people's thoughts to be heard, then people who have interesting thoughts but can't speak them out are stopped. At the same time, I think it's also very super important to not rely on technologies only, because we know all that technologies are not faultless. And if we, for instance, this is super important in the deaf community, that the increasing amount of hearing technologies is taking over in a wrong way the deaf community's ability to be self-sustained, to be able to express themselves. Because you think, okay, we can have cochlear implants, and that's going to solve the problem of deafness. So first of all, not everyone can have cochlear implant. My son never can. And secondly, you would really want that wonderful expressiveness that comes, for instance, with sign language. You want that to also flourish and be recognized. And I think their social media can really help in terms of highlighting the coolness and the amazingness of these kind of low-tech solutions that sort of save the days.
Thank you so much. I was in a similar vein, but then more for you as a researcher, as someone myself very interested in digital media. I wanted to ask you about being in this field that is undergoing these constant changes and rapid changes. I mean, so just 5-10 years ago, there wouldn't have been such a Facebook page as you talk about here, I guess, or like that's perhaps when the first ones started. So kind of how do you as a researcher keep up with that track? Because yeah, I think it's in few fields that at least in the humanities, social science, that so many changes are undergoing in such a short time.
I think the very honest answer is I can't keep up with it. And I've given up trying. But I think that sort of, there is this idea that you have to run after the newest technology. But I don't know if sort of people here in this room remember Second Life. In the research community, it was very hot topic. There were years where there were conference panels, papers, numerous papers about the importance of Second Life. There were countries building embassies in Second Life. But it's totally dead. There's nobody there, or maybe a few robots still left lingering. So not every technology is actually worth running after it in the research. And the other thing that we as researchers have to do is that we have to figure out, we have to let go of that hype of novelty. It's not only about what's new, but it's also very importantly what's old. How the stuff that we already know about, what the stuff that we already know about society, how that is going to survive or find a new shape or find a new form. And thus it's the questions that don't necessarily, it's not about change. It's sometimes about worth focusing on the sameness and the stability.
One thing in relation to your talk that that really seems to be enabled by Facebook in this case is to gather these people that are spread out over a very big area, and in the case of disabilities, this can of course be very empowering, as normally they can be very far in between. In this case, children with child syndrome. So, but at the same time, I'm guessing, of course, this makes it this makes it different, and perhaps also brings challenges. So, how does this lack of common space in the physical world affect the community, or is it then something you try to make up for? Do people have gatherings or meet? I think this is a very. I would love to hear about this.
So when Rivo was born, he was the first child in about 10 years Estonian doctors had met with that syndrome. They were not really. They said maybe there has been another child in a town that was 200 kilometers away who perhaps has the same syndrome, but we're not really sure. So for me, that was the only way. I just had no other option to meet parents with a sort of similar experiences. And of course, parents in America have sometimes different challenges. They have insurance troubles, which we are so grateful not to have here. They have to pay their medical bills, and they have to talk about their school systems. And a lot of the parents in that group, they deal with it by basically just ignoring the community outside. So there's a lot of silent community there who just reads but never participates. They will never start a thread, but how does it mean to be a parent in France with CHARGE syndrome? There are local communities as well. So there is a CHARGE Sweden community, for instance. At the same time, there are the meetings. There are the annual conference that the community gathers. And that is, of course, the highlight of everyone's year. And then you sit there on your Facebook and think, I just wish I could be there, but hey, Orlando in US with the whole family, sure, that would be expensive, to say the least, because it's also in hotels, and they make the accommodations or they make the space there, but not really. And I'm really grateful, because in Sweden there is the community. In Sweden, thanks to Ågrenska Fund, this community has had the chance to meet. They met, or we met 10 other families with CHARGE only in March. And that was so cool. That was so exciting, because it is really getting those stories, and it's really empowering to meet these people who know that. And Facebook is lovely, but it doesn't really take over those late night discussions about how was it for you to survive those first horrible years.
Tack så mycket. Thank you very much. Johan and Hanna, you can stay on the stage. And now, is there anyone in the audience who wants to ask a question? It can be in Swedish, English, and in sign language.
Hi everybody, I'm Nicolas from Greece. I would really like to ask you, because you mentioned that you cannot imagine yourself being not a researcher. So what's it so important for you? Because we're talking about inside your mind. So, and how do you feel about not being a researcher? Just with the thought of not being. Did it work like as a motivation for you in order to keep up with the difficulties that you faced?
Sort of the early years for me, or the first year was for me also filled with a lot of anxiety. But it was also sort of recognition that there are some aspects of being a researcher that you can't really let go. You might lose your job, you might not be able to do your work full time, but you can't really let go. And one of the anecdotes around this was we changed different departments in the hospital. And my husband told the doctors that mother read from the internet. And you could see the doctors going, "Oh my God, Dr. Google again." And he forgot to tell that it was the PubMed articles, the peer-reviewed research papers that I had read. But for me, that was the confirmation. So I was doing the analytical thing. I was at some point, I was having an argument with doctors, saying, "Why don't we do a risk analysis? You bring your references, I bring my references, and we do a comparison. Well, let's take it bullet point by bullet point." Doctors really didn't want to do that. I was so disappointed. Because I was thinking that because they had gotten a doctor's degree, that they also had that researcher's mindset that they would do systematic comparisons about things. So I had to explain to the doctors that no, causality and causation are two different things. So that was something that was, for me, realized that, okay, I might be in the medical system, I might be the mother. I lost my name. I lost my all the other identities. I became the mother. I became the not so very nice mother because I was pointing to papers. And that was my identity. That was me thinking, okay, that's sort of, and that became the sort of savior moment, is in a sense that, especially in Estonia, if you have a disabled child, then a lot of times moms exit the workforce. In one of the leaflets that deaf community issues, okay, now you have a deaf child. In that leaflet, there was this line saying, mothers usually leave job and start teaching their children sign language. And I was going, no, I don't want to do that. I love my job. So that was for me this kind of major identity conflict, but also a way to overcome it and basically say, no, my work as a researcher is important for myself, but also for the society at large. And there are other people who can teach my child language. So that was my sort of self-saving, self-identity moment.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Yes.
Thanks, Pille. I think this is so important, and it raises a lot of issues as a parent also. I mean, it's for all parents, what is actual normal? And I think all parents and also children struggle with this dominating discourse about being normal. So I'd like to know more about how can your research and also your experiences challenge this dominating discourse that we have in society of what is being normal?
sort of part of how does research change society is, of course, research highlights those discourses. It makes them visible. So when I was with the older children, I had this book, which is Baby's First Year, What to Expect. And you could follow chapter after chapter, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, sort of how's that gonna, what's the expected milestones? What's the expected, and then when there was a deviation out of those milestones, then you were supposed to turn to doctors. You were supposed to ask. You were supposed to go and get your child evaluated. And of course, that's also very important, because sometimes some of those, you can catch those illnesses, you can catch those differences. But at the same time, it's also super anxiety causing for parents, because, hey, he's 4 months and not turning yet. What's wrong? And it may be nothing is wrong. But then, of course, when something is wrong, then it's really good to have the treatment, to have the possibility. So I don't think that the concept of normal in parenting or in childhood will go anywhere. But I think that sort of with the spread of information and with the spread and division of things, for instance, Down syndrome has its own normal growth rate chart. And they are talking that maybe Charge syndrome should have also. Because Charge children are small. They are short in stature. And therefore this adapted normality that's more focused on that group. And that's where the internet comes really helpfully in play, because internet allows the doctors also to communicate and gather enough information about normal for that group to build those growth charts and things like that. So, but it is about, yes, talking, lifting things up for everyone, yes. And also to recognize that different is not bad. Different is cool.
I agree. Is there anyone else? Ah. No? Yeah, oh, sorry.
Yes. Well, I'm an anthropologist, and the question about normality is very important in the anthropological field. It's often subdued upon us, on the society, to create a certain kind of human being for the future. But I was thinking of, I have my brothers. I am an aunt of 2 boys that really fit on this chart diagnosis, you said?
Charge
diagnosis, yeah. They are born in Norrbotten, and they had a very terrible birth. She got a pancreatite, and she had so much pain during the birth. Myself have ADHD, and I've heard that very long birth can give this struggling people, because they think that what I've been when I was studying psychoanalysis and things like that, that in the depth of our being of nerve cells, parasympathicus and sympathicus, that is creating this struggling, strong people, depending on, because I think it was a researcher who was researching about the parasympathicus, sympathicus, and the child, the child's experience during the birth process, and that's very, very deep, and it's Yeah. I was thinking, do you have some opinion about this?
I do. It's not my field at all, but I still do have an opinions about it. So charge syndrome as a syndrome is, it happens around week 4 or 5 in the genetic mutation, where one protein that's supposed to organize building of the human body is not being produced enough. So that is long before the child is born. Secondly, human brain is super adaptive, in a sense that even if it gives you some very, very deep, horrible memories, and of course in charge community they also discuss, for instance, if those horrible memories that people have in their early hospitalization years, because they get poked with needles and they get taken blood tests and they get very, very, very many different treatments. Oftentimes they count 20 and 30 operations in their people's lives. You think, okay, that will also have some important impact. And then parents, of course, are filled with anxiety and worry. Like, oh my God, I've ruined my child's life because of those hospitalizations. But that's not really helping anyone. In a sense, first of all, or the human brain or the human being is so adaptable that it can really get over many, many things. And I'm guessing it can also get over extensively long and horrible birth experiences. I'm also guessing it can get over those first years of hospitalization. In the charge community, there are children who are inherently glad and happy, even if they go through all those struggles. And then there are children who are grumpy and unhappy. There doesn't seem to be a distinct personality trait with that community. So saying that, I'm basically saying, okay, there is the protein problem very early on. There can be the different birth experiences. There can be the different hospitalization experiences. But it still doesn't determine the person. It still really does not determine the person. And that's the really wonderful thing about the charge, is that even if they have the same faulty gene combination, and even if they look alike, and they're all lovely, and they have their struggles, it doesn't still determine who they are as people. I think that's sort of something that is really important for everyone to remember.
Yes, I think the time is running away. If there is no one else, a short question. It's too complicated. Then I would ask you, Pille, you have a song for us that you would like to play. You can tell us what is it and why do you want us to listen to this?
So okay, this song that I'm gonna start it as well. It's from Estonian, most famous Estonian composer, Arvo Pärt. Many of you have heard, but it's something very different from his repertoire. It's a song about atoms, to connect to previous week's lecture, but it's also about real strength, endurance, and joyfulness, which I think is very much what charge children are about. So this is a song about charge children, even if the charge children don't really know that this is a song about them.
Great. Then I would thank you for coming today. Thank you, Annika, Evelina, Johan, and Hannah. And of course, Pille. Give them a warm hand.